Hello, this is the metacognition.org.uk STAT CPD video on metacognitive strategies for supporting students in their monitoring. So before we go any further, as I've warned at the start of each of these videos, if you haven't watched the CPD on metacognitive theory, which is the first video out of the 8 in the CPD course, you need to go and watch this now. The reason for this is the better you understand the theory, the more these strategies will make sense, the more you will understand why we're using them, and therefore the better you will implement them. The better they're implemented, the better the outcomes for students. So what are the aims? Very similar to the others. Firstly, we're understanding why monitoring is so important for students' metacognitive abilities. And secondly, we're looking to develop the range of strategies that you have available to support students in their monitoring abilities. So why is monitoring so important? Human nature is sometimes a little bit silly, and once we've started using a strategy, even if it's not quite working, or even if we know that if we started a new strategy, we would finish sooner, we often just plow on regardless. We've started, so we might as well finish. This is a relatively redundant feature of human nature, and actually we need to be a lot more effective in monitoring. We need to understand when something isn't going right. We need to understand when we're not moving towards task completion. We need to identify errors that are occurring so that we can correct them. So by monitoring, we can do that. We're making sure that we're going in that right direction. We're picking up those errors, and we can correct something before we get to the evaluation stage. There's no point leaving something until we get to the end. The sooner we can rectify it, the better. Now, a little note of caution here. Some students will struggle to monitor their work as they do it. It's going to be a little bit of cognitive overload for them. So if you've got students who you think aren't going to be able to complete a task and to monitor it at the same time, leave out the monitoring for now and provide them with greater time to do evaluation. Then later on, once they've nailed that evaluation, once they're starting to understand the task a little bit better, then start to build in the monitoring. We need all students to be able to monitor, but we just might need to come to it a little bit later. Again, it's just a scaffolding, removing stages and gradually building them in later. So strategies, there are 7 different strategies that are available here, all quite quick and straightforward. Again, no one size fits all. You can decide what's going to suit your classes, what's going to suit your students, and what's going to suit your subject. So strategy 1 is the nice idea of a checklist. I love a good checklist. So the idea here is that either you produce a checklist or in consultation with your class, you develop a checklist of all of the key points that you should see in an answer. So if it's a maths answer, what should you see? You should see units, you should see decimals, etc. Or history, how many dates do you want to see in there, so on and so forth. So what key points should be seen in task completion? Once you've done that, students can then literally tick these lists off as they go. So if they know that they've got to include 4 dates, if they've included 4 dates in their plan, they can then tick them off one by one as they've included them in their answer. So it's a simple case of, this is what I need to include, tick it off as you go. Very quick and easy way to monitor that you're heading in the right direction. Strategy 2 is key questions. Now, often tasks and problem-solving questions include several different questions that need to be answered, especially high-level essay questions. Now, what you can do is you can break down the task or the problem into these different questions, and then this is your monitoring. Are you answering each of these questions? So write down or break down your task into the multiple questions, and then answer each one by one. And when you've answered each, you know that you are moving towards task completion. The next one is content checklists. The idea here is that maybe you use a knowledge organizer, notes from a textbook or from a book, and you write down everything that you know needs to be in an answer. So instead of being vague and saying 4 dates, you write down the 4 dates you need. Instead of saying you need to name these 10 different people, you write down the 10 different people. If you know you need to include the definition, write down the definition in your plan. Then you can tick it off as you go through your answer. It's a little bit more structured and a little bit of greater scaffold than the first strategy, because instead of being broad and saying 4 dates, you actually have got the 4 dates listed down. Instead of being broad saying remember the unit, you actually write down the unit you need, e.g. centimetre squared. So this way you're giving students a greater scaffold and they can tick off each piece of information when they have included it in their work. So strategy 4 I've called strategy success criteria. So the idea here is students make a list of what must happen for a strategy to work correctly. So this is slightly different from the content side. It's about the strategy side. All strategies, all cognitive abilities have stages, processes, steps we need to go through. So list them out. I need to do this, 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 and this. And then again, students can tick them off as they go through their answer. So, example here, to change gear you must clutch, change gear, ease off clutch, ease onto gas. So by doing this, students are making sure that they're not missing out any parts of the strategy process, or they're not getting them mixed up and putting them into the wrong order. Obviously, this doesn't guarantee success, but it will aid success if students are A, doing everything they're supposed to, and B, doing it in the right order. In effect, it's a little bit like writing out instructions. Do this, do this, do this. So it is very structured and very scripted. The next one is task success criteria. So for example, you break the task down into what it's asking you to do. So it's a little bit broader than the first type, where you're specifically saying, I want to do this, I want to do that. You just break down the task into what it's asking for. Often tasks will say, through analysis of this event, including this many dates, including blah, blah, and blah, blah. So write down everything the task is asking you to do. Then you just go ahead, write your answer, and your monitoring is just ticking these things off your list as you go. So instead of what content do you want to include, this is from a task perspective, what content is the task asking you to include. Strategy 6, one of my favorites, called warning signs. Now the idea here is to produce a list, typically in collaboration with your class, of warning points or signs that you are going in the wrong direction, typically from a strategy point of view. So if you suddenly get a negative number, for example, and your strategy or your formula doesn't allow that, you know you've gone wrong. Or if you're writing of mice and men and it firmly says do not mention Lenny, and you start talking about Lenny, then you know you've gone wrong. So this is about things that shouldn't happen in your answer, or things that you shouldn't be seeing, things that you should be writing about, things that you shouldn't see in your formula. So it's things to avoid. And this way we can try to highlight the key misconceptions, and then we can try to keep students from going and walking into these traps. It obviously doesn't guarantee success, but if we can keep students away from common misconceptions, it will hopefully keep them on the road of success. So this is kind of the scaffold that they'd have on their table or on the board, not something that they'd be ticking off, just something for them to quickly glance up at and think, right, I've not done that and I've not done that, so I'm heading in the right direction. It's also really important for evaluation. When we get to evaluation, students need to know what a good answer looks like, what a poor answer looks like, what a correct answer looks like in maths or science. So if students are aware of different warning signs, things that should appear, things that shouldn't be appearing, then it not only helps this monitoring, but it also helps the evaluation later on. Strategy 7 is the idea of flow maps. This is covered in graphic organisers during the planning stage and also by our other CPD. So the idea here is that students produce a flow map, which is a sequencing planning document, and they write down all of the stages they should be going through. This could be from a strategy perspective, or this could be from a content perspective. So for example, I start off doing this, then I do this, then I do this, then I do this. It's a more graphical and visual way to basically write a checklist. And again, I would be encouraging students to tick off the different stages as they've gone through them. This means that A, they're not missing out any stages, and B, they can just focus on one stage one by one. With a checklist, they might be a bit overawed with all of the things that they have to include, but with a flow map, they can just go through it nicely one by one. So thank you for watching this video. I hope those are 7 strategies that you can use to support the monitoring of your students in their task completion and problem solving completion. This is the 7 of the 8 videos now completed. You've got one more If you do want to recap anything or check out the resources, they're all available for free at metacognition.org.uk under the teacher drop-down, as you all know. More resources are being added all the time, so do keep coming back to check to see what's been added on CPD or resource-wise. As mentioned at the end of each video, these CPD courses and the resources are all free. If you as a school or as an individual have a few pennies or pounds spare in your budget that you could put forward towards the running cost of these websites, it would be hugely appreciated. This is just so that the resources and CPD can be kept free for people. The last thing I want to do is put it behind a paywall and having to start charge schools and charge individuals to complete it. Please share it widely as ever. Please pass it on to SLT. Please pass it on to faculty leads or anybody you think who can benefit from it. The more people who know about it, the better our teaching as a profession can get. This is the whole aim behind this CPD course. Again, follow us on Twitter at MetacognitionU to get updates, to ask questions and see what's coming out soon. And then the last CPD video now for you to complete is the Metacognitive Strategies evaluation video. So this is the final one. So go to the teacher drop down, go to the evaluation page, and then check out that CPD. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope it has been a help for you.